At 18,000 feet above a scorched desert battlefield, the sky looked calm, almost peaceful. Thin clouds drifted lazily, and the sun painted the land below in shades of gold and dust. From the ground, no one could hear her yet. No roar, no warning. Just silence. Then the radio crackled inside the cockpit. Troops in contact. Heavy armor. Were pinned down. Her gloved hand tightened around the throttle. This was her moment. They called her Killer Chick. Not because she chased death, but because death followed wherever she flew. Inside the ugliest, loudest, most brutally effective aircraft ever built, the A-10 Thunderbolt II, better known as the Warthog, she was about to rewrite the rules of close air support. This is not a story about a pretty jet or clean air combat victories at high altitude. This is a story about mud, fire, fear, and survival. This is the story of how one pilot, flying an aircraft designed for one grim purpose, became a nightmare for enemy armor and a guardian angel for soldiers on the ground. The A-10 Warthog was never meant to be loved. It didn't look fast. It didn't look elegant. And it certainly didn't look modern. Its engines were mounted high, like an afterthought. Its wings were straight and wide, built not for speed, but for endurance. And at its heart, mounted slightly off, center like a mechanical insult to symmetry, was a gun so massive it felt as though the airplane had been built around it. Not the other way around. The GU-8DA Avenger, a 7-barrel, hydraulically driven cannon designed for one job: destroy tanks. When it fired, the recoil was so violent that early engineers feared it might actually slow the aircraft in midair. Each second of fire spat out nearly 4,000 depleted uranium rounds, each one capable of punching through steel like paper. The sound it made was not a roar. It was a growl, a deep metallic BRRRT that echoed across battlefields and froze enemy soldiers in place. Veterans would later say that if you heard the BRRRT, it was already too late. And this was the aircraft she chose, while other pilots dreamed of sleek fighters and supersonic duels in the clouds. She volunteered for the Warthog, a plane that lived low, slow, and dangerously close to the ground. A plane that survived not by running away, but by enduring punishment. Titanium armor wrapped the cockpit like a bathtub. Redundant flight systems ran through separate channels. Even if half the aircraft was shredded by enemy fire, it was designed to keep flying. Because the Warthog had to come back, and so did its pilot. The making of Killer Chick. She wasn't given the nickname in training. In flight school, she was just another student, focused, disciplined, and brutally honest about her mistakes. She didn't chase glory. She chased precision. While others obsessed over perfect landings and smooth aerobatics, she drilled one thing relentlessly: target identification. On the battlefield below, mistakes were fatal. A wrong call could kill friendly troops. A delayed response could cost an entire platoon. Close air support wasn't about ego, it was about trust. Soldiers had to believe that when an A-10 rolled in overhead, it would hit exactly what it was supposed to hit, and nothing else. Her instructors noticed something unusual. She listened more than she spoke. She flew aggressively, but never recklessly. And once she locked onto a target, she didn't let go. The nickname came later, after deployment, after the first combat rotation, after the radio chatter from ground forces started to change, requesting Killer Chick on station. That was when it stuck. First blood, her first real mission, came not with a dramatic sunrise, but with dust and confusion. A convoy had been ambushed. Friendly forces were trapped in a shallow valley, enemy armor positioned on higher ground. Anti-aircraft fire lit up the sky in small, angry bursts. This was the Warthog's world. She dropped low, dangerously low, hugging the terrain as tracer rounds reached up toward her wings. The cockpit shook violently as the aircraft absorbed punishment, warning lights flickering like angry eyes. She ignored them. Her focus narrowed to the targeting reticle. She could see the tanks now, dark shapes, partially concealed, confident in their position. They didn't expect an aircraft to come this low. She rolled in. The first BRRRT tore through the air, and the battlefield changed instantly. Armor cracked open. Secondary explosions bloomed like violent flowers. The radio erupted with shouted confirmations, disbelief, relief. She didn't celebrate. She circled, again and again. She came back firing in short, precise bursts, walking the cannon fire exactly where it needed to go. Missiles followed, clean, controlled, devastating. By the time her fuel warnings demanded a return to base, the valley was silent. The convoy survived. That night, someone painted a small mark beneath the cockpit. The Warthog had tasted blood, and so had Killer Chick. Why the enemy feared the A-10. Enemy forces learned quickly that fast jets came and went. The A-10 stayed. It loitered for hours. It flew slow enough to see individual fighters. It turned battlefields into killing zones, where hiding was impossible and movement was fatal. And worst of all, it came back even after being hit. Stories spread. Pilots landing with one engine gone, with half a wing missing, with holes torn through the fuselage so large you could see daylight through them. The A-10 didn't care, and neither did Killer Chick. She flew missions others hesitated to accept. Low visibility, heavy fire, urban terrain where friend and enemy were separated by meters, not kilometers. Each mission demanded patience, nerves of steel, and absolute trust between pilot and ground controller. Mistakes meant headlines. Success meant silence. The desert did not sleep at night. It only changed its personality. When the sun disappeared, the heat lingered close to the ground, trapped between sand and steel. From 15,000 feet, the battlefield looked deceptively calm, small fires glowing like dying stars, roads drawn in thin silver lines, and shadows stretching long and crooked across the terrain. Inside the cockpit, Killer Chick adjusted her oxygen mask and listened to the steady hum of the engines. This mission was different. Intelligence had warned them the enemy had adapted. Mobile air defenses had been spotted, shoulder-fired missiles, radar, guided guns, and crews who had learned the sound of the Warthog and survived long enough to fear it. Tonight, the A-10 would not be hunting alone. It would be hunted too. The call came suddenly. A special operations team was trapped near a cluster of concrete buildings on the edge of a ruined town. Enemy armor had pulled back, but infantry with anti-air weapons now controlled the streets. Fast jets had already passed through, dropping precision weapons from high altitude, but the fighting hadn't stopped. The troops on the ground needed something closer. Slower. Personal. They needed the Warthog. Killer Chick rolled her aircraft toward the coordinates, descending until the ground began to fill the canopy, every detail growing sharp and threatening. At this altitude, there was no room for mistakes, only instincts training and the machine beneath her. Tracer rounds appeared first, arsing upward like angry red fingers clawing at the sky. She banked hard, feeling the aircraft protest as gravity pressed her into the seat. The titanium bathtub around her cockpit absorbed the shock of nearby explosions, the sound muffled but unmistakable. Warning tones chirped, then screamed. She silenced them without looking. The A-10 had been hit before. It was built for this. What mattered now was timing. On the radio, the ground controller's voice was tight, controlled, but strained. They were taking fire from multiple directions. They were running out of options. She came in low, lower than doctrine recommended, lower than comfort allowed. Buildings rushed past beneath her wings. Streetlights flashed by like sparks. Then she saw them, figures moving between cover, a launcher being raised, the unmistakable shape of a missile tube. There was no time for deliberation. The gun came alive. BRRRT. The sound tore through the night, echoing off concrete and steel. The recoil rattled the aircraft, but the rounds went exactly where she intended, carving a line of destruction through the street. The launcher disappeared in a cloud of dust and flame. Silence followed, broken only by her breathing and the steady rumble of the engines. She pulled up sharply, flares spilling from the aircraft in bright, burning arcs. A missile streaked past where she had been seconds earlier, its guidance confused by heat and movement. The Warthog shuddered as shrapnel tore into the tail. Control surfaces responded sluggishly, but they responded. She stayed in the fight. Again and again she rolled in, each pass closer, more dangerous, threading between threats that seemed to multiply with every second. Rockets slammed into fortified positions. The cannon barked in short, disciplined bursts. Every trigger pull was a promise to the men below that she would not leave them. The enemy adjusted. They always did. Guns shifted. Missiles waited for her predictable patterns. On her fourth pass, a violent impact rocked the aircraft. The cockpit filled with warning lights, a chorus of alarms competing for attention. One engine sputtered, then stabilized at reduced power. Hydraulic pressure dropped, then held. The A-10 was wounded, but alive. Any other aircraft might have turned away. Killer Chick did not. She radioed her status calmly, almost casually, as if reporting turbulence. Then she lined up for one final pass. This time, she came in from an unexpected angle, skimming so low that dust and debris whipped into the air behind her. The BRRRT echoed one last time, longer, angrier, decisive. When she pulled away, the streets below were still. The radio exploded, not with chaos, but with relief. The special operations team was moving. They were clear. They were alive. Only then did she climb. Only then did the adrenaline fade enough for exhaustion to seep in. The long flight back to base felt heavier, quieter. Ground crews stared as she landed, counting holes, shaking their heads at the damage. The aircraft looked like it had been dragged through hell and argued its way back out. Someone painted another mark beneath the cockpit. Someone else added a small, unofficial symbol, a warning more than a decoration. Because by now, the enemy knew something too. The A-10 did not announce itself with speed or elegance. It announced itself with survival. And when Killer Chick was on station, the battlefield belonged to her. The battlefield that morning was wrapped in a dirty gray haze, smoke hanging low as if the sky itself was unsure whether to watch or look away. Weather reports had warned of poor visibility, shifting winds, and dust storms rolling in from the west, but the call had still gone out. A mechanized enemy column was moving fast, using the weather as cover. If they reached the river crossing by noon, friendly units on the other side would be cut off. Fast jets could strike, but only once. What the ground commanders needed was something that could stay, observe, and strike again and again. They needed the Warthog. They needed Killer Chick. She flew low even before reaching the combat zone, sliding beneath the cloud layer, where the world felt closer, heavier. The horizon blurred into shades of brown and gray, landmarks dissolving into guesswork. This kind of flying demanded absolute focus. Every second required correction, adjustment, anticipation. Inside the cockpit, the smell of hot electronics mixed with dust sneaking through every seal. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory guiding the aircraft as her mind narrowed to a single purpose. Find the column. Stop it. The first contact came through broken visuals, shapes moving in the dust, heat signatures flickering on sensors, brief glimpses of metal where the wind tore gaps in the storm. Tanks. Infantry carriers. Support trucks. More than intelligence had predicted. Worse, they were spread out, moving in loose formation, baiting attackers into predictable attack paths. She knew the trap. Low altitude meant exposure. High altitude meant losing them in the haze. The solution was risky, almost reckless. She descended even further, letting the terrain mask her approach, trusting the A-10's rugged wings and forgiving stall characteristics to keep her alive. The moment she broke cover, the world exploded. Anti-aircraft fire erupted from multiple vehicles, a web of steel and flame rising to meet her. She didn't pull away. She pressed in. The cannon thundered, its vibration traveling through her bones. Through the aircraft, through the air itself. The first tank vanished in a violent bloom, its turret tossed aside like a discarded toy. She rolled hard, flares pouring out as missiles chased heat and hope behind her. A second pass followed immediately. Rockets slamming into the center of the column, turning movement into chaos. But the enemy had learned. One vehicle stayed quiet, its crew disciplined, waiting. As she lined up again, the missile launched, fast, clean, deadly. There was no warning tone, no time to react. Impact. The A-10 lurched violently, the world spinning as control vanished for a heartbeat that felt like forever. Fire flashed somewhere behind her. The aircraft screamed in protest. Training took over. She stabilized what she could, fighting the controls, forcing the nose level. The Warthog was bleeding, but it refused to die. She considered pulling out. Any rational assessment would have demanded it. One engine was losing power rapidly. Systems were failing in sequence, each warning light a reminder of how close she was to the edge. But below her, the column was still moving, still advancing, still dangerous. On the radio, friendly units were counting minutes, not miles. She made her decision without drama. One more pass. She lined up carefully, compensating for damage, flying the aircraft like a wounded animal, slow, stubborn, furious. The gun fired again, shorter this time, but precise. Another vehicle burned, then another. The column began to scatter, discipline collapsing under fear and fire. Smoke thickened, dust swallowed the road, and forward movement stopped. By the time she finally climbed away, the advance was over. The river crossing would hold. The flight back was silent. No music in the headset. No unnecessary words. Just engine noise and the soft hiss of oxygen. When she landed, emergency crews ran toward the aircraft, expecting the worst. They found a pilot calm, steady, almost detached. The A-10 behind her looked barely flyable, holes punched clean through metal, control surfaces scarred, an engine blackened by fire. Yet it had brought her home. Word spread fast. Not through official channels, but through stories. Through ground troops who had watched the sky and lived. Through intelligence briefings that began to mention a particular pilot, a particular aircraft, a pattern of devastation that defied probability. The nickname changed tone. Killer Chick was no longer said with humor. It was said with respect, and sometimes with fear, because the enemy had started doing something new. They stopped moving when they heard the BRRRT. They abandoned vehicles. They hid, scattered, waited. The presence of a single A-10, flown by a single pilot, had begun to shape the battlefield before a shot was even fired. And Killer Chick understood something now, something deeper than tactics or technology. The Warthog was not just a weapon. It was a message, a promise to those on the ground, and a warning to everyone else. The war was changing, and so was she. When the war finally moved on, the scars remained. Not just on the battlefield, but on the aircraft, and on the pilots who flew low enough to see the enemy's eyes. Killer Chick never asked to become a symbol. She never painted slogans on her helmet or chased headlines. She simply flew where others couldn't, and stayed when others wouldn't. The A-10 Warthog would one day be debated in boardrooms and budget meetings, labeled outdated by those who never heard gunfire from the ground. But for the soldiers whose lives were saved under its wings, the truth was simple. When everything else failed, when the sky went quiet and hope ran thin, the Warthog came. And when Killer Chick was in the cockpit, survival was no longer a question of luck, but of time. History often remembers wars through numbers and maps. But legends are remembered through moments, a low pass through smoke, a single BRRRT cutting through chaos, a damaged aircraft limping home against all odds. This was not just the story of a plane or a pilot. It was the story of what happens when courage, purpose, and brutal engineering meet at treetop level. And somewhere out there, etched into the memory of those who survived, the sound still echoes. BRRRT. Was the A-10 really that hard to shoot down? Why do ground troops trust the Warthog more than modern jets? Can any aircraft truly replace the A-10 in close air support? Is the legend of the BRRRT exaggerated or underestimated? Comment below which question you want answered next. If this story made you feel the battlefield, if you respect the pilots who fly low so others can live, then hit like. It tells YouTube this kind of history matters, and subscribe for more cinematic war stories you won't hear in textbooks. Next episode dives even deeper, because some legends refuse to die.